Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Collecting Comics, a show where we talk about comics and how to collect them. My name's Sean, and today we're going to be talking about horror and sci-fi books. Um, First, though, we want to thank our friends at Watto Scrap for sponsoring this episode of Collecting Comics. So, the first book we're going to talk about today is a book called Cold Spot. And it's a book that was written by Colin Bunn, who is also the writer of Harrow County and Regression. And then the art was done by Michael Torres, and he did the art for books like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Judge Dredd. And this book is a spine tingling. It's a spine tingling thriller that kind of like reminds me of Lock and Key. It reminds me of Lock and Key a lot, where you have a lot of like supernatural things going on, and it opens up with this lonely house out in the country, and this old man becomes very, very cold, and he goes up to check the thermostat, and he kind of yells out to his wife, asking her if she had changed the temperature of the thermostat, and she's kind of distracted, and she turns to her husband and says, "I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. What was that?" He goes, "Did you change the thermostat?" And she's like, "Oh no, I was out there looking out the window, watching the kids play." And the man was very confused. And what he ended up telling her, "You can't watch the kids." And then he just stunned in terror and looks out the window with her, and he notices the kids playing on the playground as ghosts. And I just wanted to mention too, before we continue, you might notice that some of these that the pictures are and the words are inverted, so you're not going to be able to read the bubbles or anything the way you're supposed to. We're just trying out something new. But anyway, the book starts off with the main character, Dan Kerr, driving up to this really big mansion, and he's met by the butler, and the butler's kind of being a little rude to him, telling him he's late, and Dan snaps back and says, "Well, by my watch, I'm right on time, seeing as your boss didn't want me to ever come back here." And the butler goes ahead and lets him in and walks him to his boss's office. And the first thing that he does is throw an envelope of money and some clues on the table that the man, Mr. Warren, he wants Dan to look for this lost child, or his really is his granddaughter, and her mother. And Dan's just kind of confused because he was there once before, and he says, "Last time I was here, you never wanted to see me again, and now you're giving me a job." And when he looks into the envelope and sees the money, he also pulls out the pictures, and he notices the young girl and the mom, and basically tells him, you know, she's a grown woman. Why are you having me look for her? And he asks to go to the girl's room, and he notices that the butler is a little bit on edge, and he starts to question him and tells him, "You know what happened to her." And the butler was like telling him that the girl needed to make friends, and the mom needed help, and these people came to help her, so he didn't see any harm in letting her go, but he was more nervous for his job. And Dan was able to get a location from him and where to start looking for her. So Dan ends up going to this ferry landing to get to this island called Coral's Island, which is where supposedly the girl and her mother were. And he goes into the shop to see if he can get a ride over there. And the guy there was kind of being rude to him again, and he's like, "Sorry, there's no ferries going in or out right now. I should really change that sign on the outside." And basically starts questioning about the abnormal cold that's going on in the town. And basically, he doesn't really have anything to say. And he goes, "Let me guess, you got a room for me." So Dan goes over and goes to check into his room, and he's still just stunned by this extreme cold. Goes back to the man, but not before this man starts seeing this ghostly figure and says, "You're back. I knew you'd be back." And by the time that Dan gets to the man, he's frozen solid and dead on the floor. And it basically scares the crap out of Dan, and he doesn't know what to do. But they end up calling the cops and stuff, and they're really playing it off. They're just trying to cover some stuff up. And the lead sheriff asks him what his business was, and Dan tells him he's trying to get to Coral's Island. And the man finds that a little bit odd because not very many people want to actually go out there. And he starts making accusations that Dan had something to do with the murder. And Dan basically tells him, "I had nothing to do with this. I was just trying to get a ferry, and then he gave me a room key, and I came back to ask him something, and I found him frozen solid on the floor." And the sheriff comes back. He goes, "So you're trying to get to Coral's Island?" And Dan tells him yes, and he goes, "We might be able to set you up with a boat, but it's not going to be able to leave until the morning." So Dan kind of goes off and just sleeps in his car overnight. And in the morning, one of the sheriff's helpers takes Dan into the boat and heads off to Coral's Island. And he again asks this man, "What's going on with this cold?" The weather said that it should be sunny, and only a few 100 miles away, it's supposed to feel like summer. But here, it's freezing cold, like it's supposed to be winter. And the man just says, "I don't really know what's going on with that. I don't have any answer for you." And the man takes Dan to the island and lets him go off. He tells him just to be careful on this island because a lot of things that come here don't really come back. And if he believes in ghosts, and he thinks that this island has a lot to do with what's been happening around the city. So Dan continues to walk onto the island and starts heading through the pathways that are there when he notices some things on the floor and finds a bunch of dead animal carcasses and random things on the floor that this man who's on the island was calling offerings. And he also tells Dan that he's trespassing. And Dan goes to explain that he's looking for a woman and a young girl, and if he knew where these people were. And he goes, "Yeah, there's a woman and a girl here, but the Corals won't be seeing any visitors today, or really ever. They've stopped taking them." And he goes, "You better have a really good excuse for them to come see you." And he goes, "Well, I have a really good excuse. I'm the girl's father." And the man, shocked and confused, thinks about it for a second. He goes, "So you're the girl's father?" And he tells him, "Okay, well, let's go." So the man takes Dan to this big giant mansion where he goes, "You need to really think about what you're about to do and what you're about to say, because again, the Quarrels really don't want any any visitors." And basically, just tell him that he could hold his own when he goes in there. So Dan goes in there, searching for the mom and the daughter. And when he walks in, he immediately sees them, and he calls them out. He yells at the woman Alyssa. He goes, "What are you doing here? And where's Grace, the girl?" And he's immediately met by Miss Quarles, and she tells him that you know you know about the girl. That's okay, and but you really shouldn't be here. And he goes, "Well, I'm the girl's father, and I demand to see her." And she finds it very interesting herself. And Dan starts going closer and closer to Alyssa, the mother, and talks to her. And the the guardsman, or the man who walked him into the house, and starts approaching him. And Miss Quarles stops him and lets him talk to Alyssa. And Alyssa was telling him, "Dan, you won't understand." And there's a lot more to it that we'll find out later in the book. But she was telling him that you don't quite understand what's going on here, and that they're getting help, and the Quarles have helped us do better, and to get away from her father, which was Mr. Warren, the man who hired him. And Dan just again demands to see the girl, and states, she's my daughter too. I want to see her." And Alyssa's telling him, "Well, that's not fair, because you were never a part of Grace's life anyway. So you can't just come barge in and demand to see her after never being in her life." And Miss Quarles actually steps in and says, "You know what? It's okay, because he's the father. He should be able to see the girl." So Alyssa escorts him to Grace's room, and when they as they're walking there, he notices the weird cold happening again as he's getting closer to this door. And Alyssa goes on and opens the door for him, and he sees Grace just kind of staring at the wall or at a window. And Alyssa gets smart with him, and she goes, "Here you go. Here she is. Go say hello." And Dan introduces himself as just a friend, and asking how she is and if she's okay. And Grace never really responds. But what ends up happening are these cold, ghostly figures appear behind Dan, and Dan freaks out. And he quickly grabs Grace, runs through the room and out into the hallway, and closes the door. And he's just in awe of what he saw, and asks Alyssa, "What are those things? Like, what's happening here?" And Alyssa tells him that Grace is a very sick girl, and that the Quarles are helping Grace get better, and they've promised to help us, and that's what they're doing. And they're helping us get back on our feet. And Dan was like, "That's not enough." He goes, "I'm taking her, and you're never gonna see her again." And starts taking her down the stairs. And as soon as he gets to the bottom of the stairs, he's met by Miss Quarles again. And Miss Quarles is telling him, "Well, you won't be leaving with the girl. She will be staying here, so that we can continue to help her and make her better." And Dan and Miss Quarles kind of exchange some words, and Dan kind of gives up. He says fine, and he starts walking out, and the men grab him and start escorting him out of the house. And as they're walking down the wooded pathways the same way that he came in, one of the guardsmen take a shovel and swing it at him, trying to kill him. And luckily, he was able to dodge. And he was like, "What the hell are you doing?" You know, and he goes, "You won't be leaving this island now that you know what you know." And from there, these other ghostly figures come and attack the guardsmen's and freeze them solid. And it's at that point where Dan starts making connections. He starts believing what Alyssa had to say about about Grace, and how she has something to do with these spirits that they're called her friends. And Dan takes that as Alyssa trying to tell Dan that he needs to come back to her, and he needs to help them. And he starts realizing what he has to do, and he storms back into the house, where he's met by where he ends up walking into the house to find nobody there. But that's because Miss Quarles has taken Alyssa, or I'm sorry, has taken Grace to this other part of the house, and she tells Alyssa that it's time, and it's time that you make good on your promises that you gave us, and takes Grace into this almost dungeon like area. And the whole time, Grace is or Alyssa is telling her, it's too soon, it's too soon, you can't make her do this. Well, they get to the end of this dungeon like area, and this odd looking man that we'll find to be known as Samuel, and Miss Quarles tells him it's time and we need to start moving forward with our plan. And he goes, "Oh, it's time to get made whole again." And again, Alyssa's like, "It's too soon, and she's not ready, and you're gonna put her through this, and she's not gonna be okay." And Miss Quarles basically tells her to that she needs to leave, and she's kind of forced out of the room. And that's where it's revealed that there's this dead corpse down there, and that this corpse is part of the plan. And and Miss Quarles is telling Grace it's time, and you need to use your powers to bring this person, this thing, back to life. And Grace, or Alyssa, is pushed out of this dungeon area and back into the house. And that's where Dan finds her on the floor. And Alyssa starts explaining more to Dan that we thought the Quarles were going to help us, but they want to use Grace's special abilities to do this horrible thing. And that he goes, "This is enough. I'm going to take you back to your father, Mr. Warren." And she tells Dan that he wants to do the same thing, that he wants to capitalize on her abilities as well. And Dan's starting to learn a little bit more and more that he hasn't been told the entire truth. So he basically says, "So this is all Grace is doing. She's the one who's summoning these things, and Grace or Alyssa says that they're more like her friends, and Dan decides he figures out what he needs to do, and he barges down into this dungeon area, and that's where they witness that dead corpse is now alive by the hands of Grace and her powers. And in this book, we're not really told a whole lot about what this thing is, but Dan goes to attack it, and this monster just basically stops him dead in his tracks. And Dan tells Alyssa to grab Grace and run. Just grab Grace and run. And Grace sees what's going on, and she sees that Dan is trying to help her, and she tells the corpse no. And Alyssa's surprised because this is the first time that she's talked in ages, and Miss Quarles and Samuel are surprised because she shouldn't be telling the corpse that he can't do certain things, and that she's not the boss, and that they are, and that she's going to do what they say. So because of what Dan and Alyssa have finally seen, Samuel and Miss Quarles put them into this like cellar like dungeon area, and they're just kind of stuck. And Dan curses at Miss Warren, and they tell him to watch his language because a ceremony is about to begin. A sacred ceremony is about to begin, and that's where this even more cold comes over the rest of the town, where more of these shadow figures are starting to appear around the city and start terrorizing people. And the corpse, the monster that was reborn, starts to summon and awakening more, I guess, like ghost figures, and he calls them his disciples and his children. And again, Grace tells him no, and she says, "These are not your children, they're mine," and basically just busts out with a whole bunch of power to kind of take down the monster for a minute. Well, that gives, because of this huge blast of energy, it gives Dan and Alyssa a chance to escape from where they were. And Samuel and Miss Warren, or Miss Quarles, are in shock, and they're not sure what's really going on. In this crazy power kind of goes on and grabs Miss Quarles, and Samuel gets really upset and tells Grace, "You need to let her go. How are you? You shouldn't be doing this. You need to listen to us." And Grace just really isn't listening, and through her powers, kind of commands the monster to grab Samuel and basically do away with him. And it's at this point where Dan grabs Alyssa, or I'm sorry, grabs Grace, and they start heading towards a door to escape. But that monster is also on their tail. So they get through some of these other ghost-like figures and make it out of the door, but not before Dan realizes that Alyssa has become frozen. And that's when the monster breaks through the door and basically shatters Alyssa into pieces. And Grace is turns around and tells the demon that he needs to go away, and the demon tells her, "You can't banish me. You can't put me away forever. I'll come back and I'll look for you." And basically pushes the monster back into the house and locks him away. Well, Dan is finally able to get off the island with Grace, and Mr. Warren is starting to fight with him because Dan has told him, "You will not take Grace. You will not take have legal rights over her." And he goes, "On the contrary, I have all the legal options. I need to take custody of the girl." And he goes, "Yeah, I'd like to see you try that." And it just kind of hints to that Grace will get what she wants, and it's not about what other people want. It's about people who actually want to take care of her. And the book kind of goes on just a little bit longer, and Dan is at a store, and they purchase some stuff, and another one of these ghostly figures pop up, but it ends with a picture of Samuel as this another ghostly being, and basically just saying, "We've been made whole, and we will return." And that's how that particular book ends. It's only five issues, and I wish it was a lot longer, because it was a really enjoyable read. It's been a while since this book has been out. I think it released last year, 2019, maybe 2018, but I think it was 2019. And it looks as if they want to continue the story, but as of now, nothing else has been released for Cold Spot. And again, it gave me a lot of feelings of like Lock and Key, with the supernatural and the ghost beings and the powers, the supernatural powers. And it would be interesting to see this adapted into a TV series. But before we go on to our next story, we want to thank our friends over at Watto's Scrapyard for sponsoring this week's episode of Collecting Comics. You can find them on Instagram at Watto's Scrapyard, and on Facebook and eBay as well. They make 3D printed parts for hard to come by Kenner and Hasbro vehicles, as well as resin printed head sculpts of dozens of different characters in the Star Wars universe. If you don't see a character that you like on their Instagram, send them a message and they can get it printed and designed for you for a reasonable fee. The next story we're going to talk about is a book called Parish. And this is another book by Cullen Bunn. And this particular one I could really see becoming a TV series. It it has a lot of supernatural and psychological things going on as well, that I could see characters doing a really good job at playing. This one is definitely for more adult readers, though. There's a lot of sex and drugs and weapons and things like that. And basically, it's a story of a family who run this big drug business. And it starts out with this man, and he's singing out in the middle of the street, but he thinks that he's standing out in front of a crowd of thousands and that he's a rock star. but you kind of see the powder on his nose, and it's not just any type of powder. It's actually this new drug that's called ash. And this whole time, this crowd starts gathering around this man in the street, kind of laughing at him. They start taking videos, and he continues to sing and sing and sing. And in the next panel, this man is kind of watching off to the side, just kind of smiling, and he goes, "I told him that he should have gotten home before he did this." And he's approached by a group of people who asks if his name is Dante, and he's like, "Well, who's asking?" He goes, "They were telling him, we hear that you're the guy who has the stuff called ash." He goes, the girl who's talking to him says, "We hear it gives you a really good high." And he goes, "It's not just a high. You feel it, you smell it, you live it, and you are what you see in these hallucinations." And he tells him that it's going to cost them a really good penny to be able to get it. But he ends up selling the ash to those people, and calls a guy named Bray. And Bray is one of the main characters in this book, who's more on the business end of this drug operation. And Dante's telling him, "Hey man, we need to think about upping our prices with this stuff, because I'm out already. It's early, and I'm completely out." And Dante asks, "Well, when's the next time I can get a supply?" And Bray basically just tells him, he goes, "We're getting supplies now. You'll have it by morning." And Bray turns around to his crew and he asks, "Are you guys done yet?" And basically, it reveals that they're in a graveyard, and that they're robbing. They're robbing graves for material for this new drug. And it goes into the next panel where this lady's looking out the window. What's funny about this is that her name is also Grace. So I don't know what Colin Bunn's doing there, but this woman's name is Grace, and she's worried because those men who were out in the graveyard were actually her sons, and they were making a run to get their supplies. And she turns around to talk to this man, and he basically tells her, "Listen, it's okay. It's a simple job. They're going to go get the supplies, and they'll be right back. There's nothing to worry about." And she goes, "Okay." And she kind of relaxes a little bit. And then sooner than later, they do show back up at the house, where a woman comes out of the house named Bridget, and she goes to the trucks and she starts inspecting the product. And that's when Bray was like, "Hey, you know what? Can I talk to you?" And she goes, "If it's about upping prices again, that's not my department. You need to talk to someone else about that. I only make the ash. I don't deal with the business end of it." And Bray's kind of getting a little bit frustrated with that as well. And Bridget gets back into her lab, where there's a whole bunch of other dead corpses that 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 she's working on to help make this ash. And as she's walking in there, the lady, Grace, walks in there as well from another entrance and starts talking to her. And it's revealed that Grace is also her mother, and the man that she was with in the bedroom is also with her. And she goes, "You're not here to talk business, are you?" And she goes, "No, I need some more." And that's when Bridget goes and gives her another bag of ash, and she tells her, "Listen, Mom, you need to be careful with this, because once it's gone, it's gone for good, and all your hopes of seeing and doing whatever you're doing are going to be gone. And she goes, I know, I'll take it seriously, and I'll slow down on it. And it's at that time where where she goes to this business meeting, and she meets this man, and he basically starts telling her that his bosses are interested in the ash. And she goes, that's great, how much do you want? And the man goes, I think you misunderstand me. We don't just want the ash, we want the entire company. And that's when Grace becomes a little bit more focused, and she starts listening to what the man is having to say. The man named Simon has to say, and he's basically saying that his bosses are very strong men, and he would hate for something to happen to her or her family. And she asks, well, that sounds like a threat to me. He goes, no, it's not a threat. It's just reality. He goes, we're willing to compensate you very, very nicely. Other groups who might come to you may not be as willing to make a business decision, and that they might just take it. And moving forward during this time, in another location, Dante decides to try some of this ash, and he goes and heads and takes it, and that's when he starts having his hallucinations. And basically, what the ash is it allows you to live and feel the the life of the person that the ash was made out of. And in this particular ash sample that he has, it was a bunch of porn stars, and he starts hallucinating of these women kissing on him, and then they immediately turn into these zombies that start eating him alive. And that's basically how the first issue ends. Not before Grace is talking to the man again, and she was telling him that they want it all. They want all of it, and I don't want to get rid of this business. It's a family business, and it should stay that way. And the man starts talking, but not before he starts fading away. And she rushes over to her supply of ash, and takes it. And he goes, when that ash is gone, so am I, and it's forever. And she goes, I know, I just don't want to be alone. And the next issue opens up with the investigation of Dante's death, and these cops who are basically in on a couple of these drug rings say it was bound to happen, and it looks like it was just a bad dose, and he had the wrong end of it. And back at the main house location where the lab is, Bray goes over to Grace, his mom, and tells her, "You should have let me be at that. You should have let me be at that meeting. I should be there." And she basically just has to level with him. She goes, "Listen, after your father died, I became the leader of this household and this business, and and you need to know your spot in this business. And right now, Mine is to lead it and to run it the way it should be ran. And Bray goes to respond and tells her, one of our dealers died the other night from the ash. And he says to finish, I wonder if that would have happened if Dad was still in charge. And it kind of goes into a flashback with Bray and his father, where it shows him basically getting ready to commit his first crime. It really doesn't go much into it, but with his father asking him, "Are you okay? Are you sure you can do this? You don't have to do this." And he goes, "No, Dad, I'm fine. I'm fine. I can do it." And that was really the only flashback we get. And one of the other brothers, I can't remember I've been searching for his name, but I can't find it. Goes back to Bridget and kind of tells her, one of the dealers died. I don't know if you heard, and all Bridget has to say is, well, if the ash is misused, then I'm not surprised that someone got hurt and died from it. And the brother just kind of goes and asks who this person was, and she basically says supposedly he was some kind of warlock sorcerer guy who was able to do a whole bunch of stuff. And she starts taking pieces and putting it in a jar, labeling it, and puts it into this big cabinet refrigerator where she holds all of her samples. And it's at this time where Grace goes back to meet Simon, the guy who is trying to purchase the company on behalf of his employers, and they exchange some words. And basically, he asks Grace out on a date, and at this time too, at another location, the cops run into Bray, and like they're trying to figure out what's going on and why all this stuff is happening. And we end up finding out that some of these cops are actually dirty, and they're also working for another man named Raphael, who's another cartel. And he basically just got off his high of ash, and he was in shock, and he was like, wow, I felt it, I heard it, I smelled it, like I was living whoever this person was. He was saying that he was like a god to these people and leaders, or he's a leader to these people, and he basically got them all to kill themselves. And it was this man who told his people to believe in him, and it's time for us to go and time for us to be better. And they all took some poison. And Raphael's like, I really like this. I like it a lot. And he goes, I want it, so I'm going to take it. And it goes, we are skipping a bunch of panels on this one because the heavier sex scenes that are in this particular book. So it is a little bit longer, and it is a lot more detailed than what I'm just giving here. But I don't want to give away too much of the spoilers, because some of those panels explain exactly what's happening. So again, you should really go check this book out. And it picks up with Grace and Simon at this restaurant, and Grace starts talking about the ash, and he goes, this wasn't supposed to be about business. Are you always about business? And she goes, this is just supposed to be friends having a dinner. And this is where those cops show back up, and they're waiting for Raphael, and he basically kind of scares one of the guys. He's like, takes advantage of that. He goes, you know what? I'm glad you're afraid of me, because what that means now is I have the control, and you guys need to get me what I want. And it goes back to Bridget, and she's looking at a certain vial of the ash, and it ends up being an ex-boyfriend of hers. And this ex-boyfriend is the person who taught her how to make the ash. And she was looking for different ways to make it better. So she taps into his life and what he was doing at the time through the ash that was made from his body. And she's looking around and she's trying to figure out what's going on, and she sees herself in this, and the man goes to give her a knife, and there's actually a woman who's tied up in there, and he was telling her, you know, we can get the ash from the dead, but he goes, I also think we can get it from the living, and I want to try that now. So here's this knife. Go and get what we need from this woman. And the woman was freaking out, and Bridget was, she had too much moral conscience to just murder somebody like that. And she actually goes to attack her ex-boyfriend, and and he ends up dying himself. And and in one of the other panels, she kind of looks down at her abdomen, and she's kind of bloodied up because she was actually feeling what he felt. And then we go back to another run that the brothers had to do, and towards the beginning of the book, Bray was telling him that, you guys need to learn your all spots, and everybody has their job. And one of the brothers kind of got smart with it, and he goes, you know what, we're just gonna get our own people to haul these bodies around, so that we can think smarter, not harder. And it's at that time where they're actually attacked, and by these men. They don't know who they are, and one of the brothers is like, "Get out of here, run! I'll take care of this." He basically goes, "All right, sister, what did you make for me?" And he takes some of the ash, and he finds that he turns into this war soldier, and basically starts kicking ass on these guys, and he's making headshots, and he's being strategic, and now all of a sudden he's a warrior and a fighter, and he's scrapping with these soldiers and really kind of taking them out. And that's where Bray would start trying to get a hold of these guys, because at this time he didn't really know what was going on with the whole operation. And he was just kind of checking in, making sure that everything was okay. And it moves on to the brother who was told to run, somehow got captured, and it's never revealed as to how he got captured, but Raphael has somehow captured the guy, and he's hanging upside down, and Raphael's telling him, I get what I want and I take it, and your family's about to learn that now. And the man's all bloodied up and dripping and stuff. And what it doesn't show you is just yet is that he's actually over water, and he's dripping blood into the water. And the man again tells him that your family will learn because I get what I want. And that's where this big alligator comes up and attacks the man hanging upside down. And that's basically the last we see of this guy. And after that attack on him, Raphael's like, you see what I did there? I've done so much for the city. It used to be trash, and now I've made it into a really good place for us. Kind of being sarcastic and bragging. And by this time, Grace finds out that her son was murdered, and she's just devastated. And and that's when her husband, who has died, kind of comes back to her, and he starts telling her, he goes, you know, when I was running the business, this wouldn't have happened, and now our son's dead. And um, he's he's slowly starting to fade away. And that's when a vehicle comes back to the house, and they bring the corpse of their brother back. And Bridget comes to process him and get him out, and start preserving what she needs to get from him. And the family is just devastated, and they want revenge. And that's basically what Grace is telling Bridget. And she says, I want you to create something horrible, something that is evil, and will make people regret that they ever mess with us. And to prove to herself she's just as good, if not better, than of a leader than her husband was. And basically what happens is the men capture the cops that were working, were like kind of like double agents and working for both sides. And they start telling the cop starts telling him, he goes, you can't do this to me, I'm a cop and I know this and this and that and stuff. And they were saying, you don't know the gravity of the situation, and that your partner has told us everything and stuff. And that's when Grace comes in, and he starts telling her stuff, and basically just slices his throat. And after he gets the information, and the other cop is like, you know, I'm loyal, and I've done a lot for you guys, but they felt too betrayed, so they went ahead and took him as well. And it goes back to Raphael with this party that he's in, and he hears something. The guards actually got beat outside, and it's there where the doors bust open, and they start shooting up the place, but they're careful not to hit Raphael, but instead they spray the ash on him, and he inhales it, and he immediately starts hallucinating and starts seeing this horrible apocalypse. And it basically just tears him from the inside, and he goes so insane that he dies. And this is the family's way of making a point and showing that nobody will ever mess with us again. And this in this particular panel, you can see the vials of not only Raphael but the other two dirty cops. And this is also where Grace goes back to Simon and tells him that you can go and tell your bosses that we will not be accepting any offers. And if they have anything to say about that, or threaten us, or try to come for us, well, we'll be ready, and they'll learn very quickly to not ever underestimate us, or mess with us again. And that's where you see the vials of the ash from those from the two cops and Raphael, basically just making a point. And before we get into this next book, these two books are kind of where horror stories are going nowadays. They're more of the supernatural. They're more of like the ghosts and stuff. It's not like horror books like they used to be. And that's what this book is right here. This is Monsters Unleashed number 4. Uh, this is a magazine. It has about most of them have about 3 to 5 short stories. And there's a couple of cool things about this book. It's the first appearance of Satana, which is a book that we've talked about in the past, where it was the first appearance, or her book has the first appearance of Rocky Raccoon, also known as Rocket Raccoon. And there's actually in this book as well there's a story called The Hand, and it was written by Stan Lee. So even Stan Lee had his own horror stories that he would write that would get put into these books and stuff. And the cool thing about them is, again, one, you get a lot of short stories out of it. So you get all these little stories about Frankenstein or vampires or monsters or freaks, which is I can't remember, but it's either in this book or the next book, where it's the circus guy and stuff like that. And the cool thing about this story is that this doctor, tries to acquire the body of Frankenstein, and eventually he does acquire him, and him and a partner are kind of analyzing the body, and like, this is crazy. Well, his partner reveals that he's dying and that there's really no time left for him. So what he does in this particular book is he takes the brain of that guy and puts it into Frankenstein. And the man was telling him, I was better, or the new Frankenstein was basically telling him, I was better off dead, and now you put me in this body, and now I can't do anything. And basically attacks the man and locks him up, and eventually kills him. And then you get just stories about like wizards and other type of horror style occult stories. And the other cool thing about this is these magazines are big. They're like 70-page books that talk about the horror industry itself, whether it's monsters or in this particular storyline, this is the first appearance of Satana, the daughter of Satan. And while not crazy popular, or some of them will go for quite a bit of money, there's little nuances in them that make their way into modern day comics, at the time modern day comics, where you do get something like the first appearance of Rocket Raccoon, or you do get a trial run of a character who eventually got their own main storyline and things like that. And again, they kind of capitalize on the horror movies and back in the day with monsters and vampires, and the damsel in distress and the man who comes to save her. And you just basically see those type of things with these creatures, these monsters. And it talks about the industry and what's going on. Maybe not so much with toys, but like maybe they get a director of a movie and they have a little bit of a bio, about them and their work and things like that. And they're a lot of times they're really obscure. You could see mermaids, and you could see men shooting things, and monsters and murderers and things like that. And we want to thank all of our Patreons who help support this channel and all of our shows on our Collecting Weekly network. We'd like to personally thank Ben Porter, Griffin Campbell, Sean Fear, Ian Seeby, Renee Mendez, Eric Marcel, Quinn Aguirre, Leo Hernandez, King Louie, Mark Pearson, Dan Lee, Deanie Martin, Stephen Krent, Jason Nelson, Big Fern, King Zachary, Caesar Marquin, Eddie Mendez, Eric Ruiz, Mario Cortez, Stephen Percha, Sean Yotzi, Scott Bradley, Jesse Contreras, and Steve and Maria Stanley. And again, thank you guys so much for supporting us and all of our shows that are on the Collecting Weekly network. And these are our stickers. These are our stickers for the next month. $5 tier members will get the OFAC and the small talk. But if you're a $15 member, you will also get the new this week sticker. And right now we still have two tiers, a $5 tier and a $15 tier, both of which have really good perks. But the $15 tier has a really good perk where you can contact Darkside Customs after a certain period of time and get yourself a painted head sculpt. And we'd like to also shout out all of our other shows on the Collecting Weekly network. Auction, which should actually be starting up here really soon, maybe in the next week or so. Small Talk, Collecting Weekly, which is our main podcast with Zach and Dean. The Joy of Hobbying, where Zach kind of takes little hobbying tips and practices them and shows us how to do a lot of cool stuff with our figures and things like that. After Dark, Collecting Rarities, Only Fools in Comics, and Creeps Are Us. And some news for Collecting Comics. It is no longer going to be a bi-weekly show. We are going to move to once a month. And I'll be honest with you guys, it's mainly because of I'm a school teacher, and with us working with COVID and getting the kids back and things like that, it's almost a logistical nightmare. But we're starting to get through it. So it's we're starting to get comfortable. We're starting to get our stride, and things are working out that way. So hopefully we'll get back to a more regular schedule. But for now, Collecting Comics will be a monthly show. And I want to say thank you, and we appreciate you guys, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Collecting Comics.